The ground cracks under a weight that should not move that fast. A shadow rises from the dust, taller than a transport pod, and it is already running before the dust clears. Every alarm on my console turns red at once, and Grace Sullivan is still walking forward, hands loose at her sides, watching the creature come at her like she is watching rain fall outside a window. I am the one who is supposed to stay calm. I have run this training ground for 11 cycles. I built half of it myself, piece by piece, to be the hardest test any recruit will ever face. My name does not matter right now. What matters is that a 19-year-old human girl is standing in front of a 700-kilo hunting beast, and she has not even raised her arms. The beast lunges. Grace steps to the side, small and quick, and the creature's own weight carries it past her and down into the ravine behind her. She does not look back to check. She keeps walking toward the next marker like she stepped around a puddle. My hands are shaking on the console. Around me, the other instructors have gone silent. This is supposed to be the moment recruits break. This ground was built from the worst conditions our scouts ever recorded across 100 worlds. Gravity that crushes soft bones, air that burns unprotected lungs, rain that eats through unprotected skin, and creatures grown from combat stock with one purpose only. Every recruit who enters this ground is tested to the edge of what a living body can survive. Most of them do not reach the halfway point standing up. Grace reaches the halfway point and checks her wrist device like she is checking the time before a meeting. Behind her, the rest of the class is not doing as well. Dinar, one of our strongest cadets, is on his knees near the second ridge, both arms wrapped around his own chest, his breathing frills flat against his skull the way they go when a Vasati body decides it would rather give up than keep fighting gravity that heavy. I key the emergency channel, ready to call for extraction, when I see Grace change direction. She is not walking to the next marker anymore. She is walking toward Dinar. I want to tell her to keep moving, that helping another recruit is not part of the scoring, that her own survival should come first inside this ground. But something stops my hand before it reaches the comm switch. I want to see what she does. She crouches next to him, gets one of his arms over her shoulder, and lifts him the way you would lift a bag that is heavier than expected but not impossible. Dinar outweighs her by a wide margin. She does not seem to notice. She starts walking again, now carrying almost twice her own weight through gravity strong enough to have already broken 2 other cadets today, and she is talking to him the whole time, telling him to breathe slow, telling him they are almost past the worst of the incline, telling him a joke about the size of his boots that makes absolutely no sense to me but seems to help him keep his eyes open. They cross the ridge together. 2 more cadets have already been pulled by the recovery drones behind them. Grace sets Dinar down at the aid station, checks that the medical team has him, and turns back toward the course without a single word about what she just did. The next section is the acid rain field. I designed this part myself, and I designed it to be cruel on purpose. The rain here is not simply water. It carries a chemical that eats through unprotected material within minutes, and the sound of it hitting the ground is loud enough to drown out your own thoughts. For a Vasati cadet, this section is not only physical, it is old fear, buried so deep in our bodies that no training can fully remove it. Our ancestors lived through storms like this before we built shelters strong enough to survive them, and some part of every Vasati brain still remembers. Grace pulls her hood up when the first drops start falling. She does not run. She does not flinch when a drop lands near her boot and hisses against the ground. She simply keeps her pace steady, 1 foot after the other, muttering something under her breath that my translator picks up as, "This is nothing compared to the storm during my cousin's wedding." I do not understand the reference. I am beginning to understand that I will never fully understand humans, and that this may be the most useful piece of information I gather all year. By the time she reaches the far side of the rain field, 4 more cadets have needed extraction. Her suit reads clean. Her heart rate reads calm. The medical officer beside me actually taps her own instrument twice, certain it must be broken. The ground shifts again once the rain clears, into a stretch we call the temperature line, where the surface swings from burning heat to freezing cold within only a few hundred steps. This section alone has ended more careers than any other part of the trial, because a Vasati body struggles badly with sudden change, and the shift here happens faster than any of our instincts expect. A cadet named Sela goes down near the middle of the stretch, folding at the knees the moment the heat hits its peak, her frills pale and her breathing shallow. I am already reaching for the emergency channel when Grace reaches her first. She does not try to carry her this time. Instead, she pulls her into the narrow shade thrown by a rock formation, unclips a water pack, and gives her small measured sips instead of letting her drink freely, counting slowly under her breath, the way someone counts out a steady rhythm for another person to follow. She keeps talking the whole time, quiet and even, telling Sela to match her breathing to the count, to look at nothing but the rock in front of her, to ignore the ground and the sky and just focus on one slow breath after another. It takes several long minutes, but Sella's color returns, her breathing steadies, and she is able to stand again on her own before the medical drones even reach the location. Grace helps her to her feet, tells her the cold section right after this one will actually feel like relief compared to what she just went through, and this turns out to be exactly true. Not every cadet on the ground today is grateful for the help. A cadet named Torv, further ahead near the recovery marker, watches all of this happen and says, loud enough for my comm to pick it up clearly, that no recruit should be able to move through this ground without strain unless something is being done for her that the rest of them are not receiving. He asks, directly, whether her suit has been modified, whether her scoring has been adjusted, whether the instructors are simply protecting the one human recruit because command wants a good result to report. Grace stops, looks at him, and does not raise her voice at all. She tells him he is welcome to check her suit readings himself once this is over, that she has no interest in a result that is not real, and that if the instructors want to disqualify her for finishing without difficulty, she will accept that outcome without complaint. Then she asks him, plainly, if he is doing all right, because the temperature line clearly took more out of him than he is letting on, and would he like some water before they keep moving. Torv does not answer right away. When he does, his voice has lost most of its edge, and he says only that he will manage, and that he did not mean to accuse her of anything, only that none of this made sense to him. Grace tells him that is fair, that it does not make much sense to her either, and that they should probably just keep walking before the ground finds something new to test them with. I flag her suit readings myself the moment I hear Torv's question, and I confirm what I already suspected. Nothing has been altered. No setting has been adjusted in her favor. Every reading on her equipment matches exactly what every other cadet has been given today. The only difference is the body wearing it, and the mind steering that body through conditions it was never designed by us to expect. The final structured section before the open ground is the crossing point, a narrow path over a ravine with a drop deep enough that nobody wants to test what happens at the bottom. The path is not stable. It shifts under weight, and today's weather has left it slick. I watch 3 cadets cross it slowly, testing every step, sweat visible even through their suits. Grace jogs across it. Halfway over, one of the remaining cadets ahead of her loses footing. His hand catches the edge, but his grip is already sliding, and there is no time for anyone at my station to reach him before he goes over. Grace closes the distance in 3 steps and grabs his wrist just as his fingers give out completely. She does not have proper leverage. She is smaller than him, standing on an unstable surface, holding his whole weight over a drop that would end things badly for him if she lets go. She holds on anyway, braces her boots against a ridge in the stone, and pulls him back up with a sound that is more effort than I have heard from her all day. He is shaking. She pats his shoulder once and tells him the path gets easier from here, which is not entirely true, but it seems to be exactly what he needs to hear to keep walking. They reach the end of the crossing point together. This is when she calls it in over the open channel, and her voice is as steady as it was at the very start. Is this the lunch break? She asks. I want to know if the real test starts after this, because if this is supposed to be the hard part, I think there might be a mistake somewhere in your scoring system. I do not have an answer ready. I tell her, honestly, that this is not a break, that this is the trial, that what she has just completed represents conditions we consider among the most difficult a living being can survive. There is a pause on her end, then she says, "Oh, that explains why everyone looks so rough," and keeps walking. I have run this course for 11 cycles and I have never once had that conversation. I do not get long to think about it, because the ground gives me a new problem within minutes. One of the containment field generators along the eastern perimeter fails. This is not part of the trial. This is a real fault, the kind our maintenance team checks for every single cycle specifically so it never happens during a live run. But it happens now, and the fence holding back the training ground's largest specimen, a creature we only use for observation from a safe distance, drops for exactly 4 seconds before backup power restores it. 4 seconds is enough. The creature is already through the gap and moving toward the crossing point, toward the exact group of cadets still recovering there, toward Grace and the boy she just pulled back from the edge. I am shouting into the comm for immediate evacuation, for every available response team, but the ground team is minutes away and the cadets are exhausted, and this creature is not scored for training purposes because it was never meant to reach anyone at all. Grace turns and sees it coming before I can even finish my warning. She does not run. She pushes the boy behind her, toward the recovery point, and looks around fast, the way someone looks when they are actually thinking instead of only reacting. There is a coil of safety cable near the crossing point, left there for exactly this kind of failure, thick and heavy, meant to anchor recovery lines. She grabs it, swings it hard across the ground in front of the creature, and the sudden motion and noise makes it hesitate. just long enough for her to step back and put distance between herself and the others. It circles instead of charging straight in, testing her, the way predators do when something does not behave the way prey should. Grace keeps the cable moving, keeps her feet planted, keeps her voice calm as she tells the boy behind her to keep walking, not running, toward the aid station, because sudden movement is the thing that invites a chase. The response team arrives within the minute, faster than I expected, and the creature is guided back through a temporary field before anyone is hurt. When it is over, Grace lowers the cable, breathes out once, hard, and looks at the twisted fence line with an expression that is not fear. It is closer to mild irritation, the way you might look at a door that will not close properly. That was not part of the test, she says, more of a question than a statement. No, I tell her, it was not. Good, she says. I was starting to think this whole place just runs on bad luck. I walk out to the crossing point myself once the ground is cleared, which I have never done before in 11 cycles of running this trial. I want to understand what I am looking at. I ask her, plainly, how she managed all of it, the gravity, the rain, the crossing, and now a fence failure, without her body ever showing the kind of strain every other cadet showed today. She shrugs, the way you shrug when someone asks why you are not cold on a day you find perfectly comfortable. Where I grew up, she says, we get real storms, the kind that knock down trees and cut the power for days. My grandmother lived somewhere with actual winters, deep snow, and animals that could genuinely be dangerous if you were not careful. My father spent 2 summers helping fight wildfires with nothing but hand tools and a lot of walking. I once got lost on a hike for almost half a day in weather colder than your rainfield and had to wait for a rescue team with no idea when they would arrive. This place has rules. It has a medical team standing by. It has people watching every second, ready to help if something goes wrong. That is what made it feel like a break. Something trying to hurt you on purpose, but with people ready to catch you if you fall, is not the same as something dangerous that simply does not care whether you live or not. I do not have a response prepared for that either. I have spent 11 cycles believing I understood exactly how much a living body could endure, because I built the numbers myself, tested them, refined them across cycle after cycle. I am beginning to understand that those numbers were built around Vasati limits, and that somewhere out among the stars, an entire species grew up treating conditions like this as an ordinary Tuesday. Grace finishes the trial with a time that breaks every record we have kept for 6 cycles. The medical team clears her without a single flagged reading. Dinar, the cadet she carried across the ridge, finds her afterward and tells her, with visible difficulty, that he owes her more than he can properly express in our language, and she tells him he does not owe her anything, that anyone would have done the same, which I know for a fact is not true, because I watched everyone else on that ground today, and not one of them stopped. I have already started drafting the report that will follow this cycle's trial. It will say, plainly, that the Deathworld endurance trial, built to represent the harshest conditions any living recruit might face, was completed by one cadet with no visible strain, and required its instructors to redesign their understanding of what counts as difficult in the first place. Grace has already asked about requesting a posting somewhere harder than training ground conditions, somewhere real, because in her words, she wants to see what an actual difficult place looks like. I have recommended the transfer. I have also recommended in the same report that before anyone on this base describes anything as the worst possible environment again, someone should first ask a human whether they have ever been camping. Word of today has already reached the other training bases faster than I expected. 2 senior instructors from neighboring stations have contacted me directly, asking whether their own intake programs could request human candidates for the next cycle. I have told them the truth, which is that I do not fully understand what I watched today, and that I am not certain our species is ready for what it might mean to stand beside people who treat our hardest ground as an ordinary afternoon. Dinar, walking past my station on his way to the medical bay for a final check, stops just long enough to say that whatever posting comes next for him, he hopes it puts him on the same team as Grace. I find that I hope the same thing myself, and I have never once said that about a recruit before this cycle began.